we are live right now. All right. It looks like we are live.
We started last time, too.
That's right. So this is our normal Be the Bridge beatboxing session. I'm glad that everybody's here for that. We're going to drop a hot 16 when we can. It's good to be with everybody. My name is Darryl Ford. We are jumping in. You know, just by way of review for folks who may not know, this was kind of born out of a text group that we kind of created, a little chat that we had. It does go down in the chat.
Blue bubbles for some, not everybody. But you know, why did we have this? We were doing this because really there are a lot of kind of collective feelings, emotions, frustrations, joys, all the things, and these are folks that we really have kind of grown to love and trust to talk through some of these issues. Yeah.
So in that, there are a lot of things that come up as things happen in the country, as things happen around the world. We all have some deep feelings about it, and we just kind of raw share these things in there. We throw all the things in there. So as I talk about who we are, let's just kind of go around the table and kind of share who we are, how we got here, and we'll kind of move on. I'll start on my list.
My name is Will. I have the privilege of serving on the board of Be the Bridge, and we also have a church and a community organization called the Hub West Cobb, and these are my people.
Yeah. My name is Dion. I am a local church pastor in Sewanee, Imago Dei Church, and just like Will, these are my people. Yes, sir.
Oh.
And I am Latasha Morrison, and I am the founder and CEO of Be the Bridge, and these are my people, and these are just people that I go to when I have questions, and I love it.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Jefferson Jones. I used to serve as the Youth and University Program Manager at Be the Bridge, and I just can't get away. This is family. They've become family. And I'm also a youth pastor at Change Church in Atlanta, Georgia, and also do some other things. We'll get into that later. And these are my people.
That's going to be the new tagline.
My name is Terence. I'm just happy to be here.
You know what?
I am. Like I've come to love these people because, you know, on like the hard days, I am reminded that I have community, that I am doing life not in isolation, but with people who are thinking like me, challenging me, but also thinking critically about the world. I lead an organization called Love Beyond Walls that I founded, and I'm just grateful to be here for that.
Yes, sir.
I am Darryl Ford, been able to kind of be a trainer and do some work with Be the Bridge, as well as served as a pastor here in Atlanta for the better part of 14 to 15 years, and I serve as an attorney now. So these are my people. I think that's kind of the theme, and it's been...
You're serving as a what?
I serve as an attorney right now. That's right, yeah.
Attorney
Yeah, one of those. We keep saying these are my people, and I think it's interesting and it's necessary because, man, when things are hard, you start to wonder, like, where is my tribe, right? Who are the people with whom I can just share some of these kind of deeper feelings? You know, sometimes you feel like you can't share these feelings with everybody. I mean, for real, like, you don't know what type of things might come back. You don't know how people feel. You don't know what kind of reprisal you might have to face. So those things can be really, really heavy because on the one end, you want to be able to be authentic, but at the same time, you're not trying to upend whatever's happening with other folks. But sometimes it feels like it needs to be said. And so to that end, obviously, we just came out of celebrating Martin Luther King, and my argument would be we should be celebrating him all year round. But that is the day that has been chosen for us to recognize the work of Dr. Martin Luther King. I was reminded of a quote we've all heard. We all have probably learned and listened to quotes from Dr. King, really the popular cherry-pick quotes ad nauseum, but there's several others. One of the ones that stuck out to me that really resonates with me is a conversation that Dr. King had with the late, great actor Sidney Poitier. And there's a video out there we can find where Sidney Poitier is talking about the last conversation he had with Dr. King, and in that conversation, he said that he could notice that Dr. King was just overwrought with grief. You could tell that he wasn't his normal kind of self, and he kind of looked at him and asked, "Martin, what's wrong?" And
To paraphrase, basically, Dr. King had talked about how, man, we've done all this work. There's a lot of good work that's been done. There are folks that seem to have bought in on some level. He said, but now I fear that we are integrating into a burning house. And I want to just leave that there. And how does that hit you now? What do you think he was really talking about? And what does that look like for us? So anybody, just jump in and how does that sit with you?
What came to mind is most people, when they're encountering a fire, they don't die from the flames, they die from the smoke. And I think we think it's not as dangerous because it's not as hot in certain rooms, but the smoke will kill you. Ooh. And I think that burning house is polluted with supremacy. That burning house is polluted with capitalism and materialism. That burning house had a room for us without intending to give us any agency. And so that's just what comes to mind off the bat.
I think I'll kind of bookend that a little bit or speak to that. When I think about it, I take it kind of literally when I hear him say it, because I feel like most of what we get from Dr. King, especially in the media piece, we see one side as far as how hopeful he was, how altruistic he was, and he was all those things. How, like when we have the speech that he did prior to him being assassinated, talked about he was relishing, Moses and going to the mountaintop and seeing the glory of the coming of the Lord and all these things, and this hopefulness, and how he was wanting to get the Negro, as he would refer to be a part of the dream, a part of what America was, a part of this up and coming, this great place. And then in retrospect, when he's speaking to Mr. Poitier, he's like, well, I fear, I have an inkling, a suspicion that I may have been doing this thinking we were doing something that we really weren't. Like we were going to something optimistic, something great, but this thing is actually the Titanic, and it's sinking and it's burning. And that's kind of how it hit me when you.
Tasha, I wanted to direct something to you for this, and you're going to jump in, but I want to direct it to you because leading an organization like, and Terence, Dr. Lester, I'm sure you can speak to this as well, but leading an organization like you do, where you've got a number of folks from different backgrounds, but we also have folks from majority cultures that are heavily involved and desperately want to be a part of this work. How does that hit you? Because obviously we're talking about kind of back then the language would have been integration, but this is still some of the same sentiments, right? What it means to bring folks from various backgrounds for the cross and hold hands and all the things that people would say was this idealistic view that we believe is true of the kingdom. Does that resonate with you? Do you feel that?
Yeah, I definitely feel it. And I think one of the things that I'm thinking is like, there was a lot, I feel like what he was kind of reimagining, just thinking through, was there was a lot that was done policy, but not culturally. And so there was a shift in policy, but not a shift in heart. And so we've never reckoned with the cultural heart connection. And an example of that would be desegregation. So when we did desegregation, it was still done from a white, really white narcissistic lens. And, so when you look at the schools that were closed, so instead of that being interpreted as, about equity and equality, it was interpreted as, no, our schools and our teachers are less than. And so when you look at how desegregation happened, it still was done in an unjust way. So something that you're bringing, and so we look at even a lot of policies and how we've done them, they're still done through the lens of white narcissism. And I think that's the part where I think as we study this and we look at the mistakes, because we have to think critically about it. I know people don't like us to think critically, but when we look at the lens of where we've come from, we're not in the same place. Yes, there was desegregation happened, but we never rectified the issue with redlining and the property taxes. So you built the school system on top of redlining districts and with with property where they don't have the property taxes to support the school. So you still kept that system instead of like shifting that system. So I think that's when you start saying like it's a burning house. And we're seeing the impact of that. If you can unravel something that's been here for 70 years within 4 months, it shows you that the foundation was rotten.
Okay. You just came out with the heavy hitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Either one.
So, man, Ruby Bridges is the image that I have as a child integrates a school. I recently read an article about Ruby, and it says some of the rioters, right, who were in the street protesting, trying to uphold segregation, were yelling out racial slurs to a child, hoping that this black child, would not enter in the school. National Guards were out there. And I just think about that, man, because like it was law that black people could not read. It was law that you couldn't drive in certain areas, right? You were talking about law, you're talking about de jure segregation. And although we've seen the abolishment of certain laws, what you're talking about is de facto. It is still by fact. It may not be by law, but the fact still remains. That's in practice, right? And that's what we're seeing today. And so Ruby Bridges is still alive. I immediately thought of her as she gave her account. And I also thought about, my mind is drawing a blank on her name. She just passed. She was one of the Claudette Colvin, but also one of the Tulsa.
Oh, the massacre. Yeah.
She's the last living. Yes. Yeah. And it was not too long ago.
That's right.
But she gave her an account, in the presence of the U.S. committee about how she could still hear people's voices and the screams and things blowing up. Like she said this, I think it was in 2019, something like that. Yeah. It was really recent. So Viola Fletcher. And so like when I hear Dr. Will talk about this this integration into a burning house, it's like you have access to something that never valued your existence anyway. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, that's spot on. Dr. Terence, you made me think about just this integrating into a space that, yes, you're in the same room, but the mindsets are different. And the people that we're integrating into this space with, they don't have the mental, emotional, spiritual capacity to handle who we are as human beings. And so what we have here is this, what appears to be a unified space where there's still a disconnect. And I've heard this phrase being said, you cannot convince the unconvincible. And so even with this measure of integration, like there's no way that could have been enough to convince people who have been conditioned, trained, and raised to see us as less than, to accept us as equal.
Bro.
Go ahead.
Right. To what you said, right? What I heard was that they didn't have a problem with our presence to begin with. What they've always had a problem with is our personhood. So you think about, we were always side by side. If you think about the slave ship as a metaphor, and I'm just using that terminology, we are people first that happen to be enslaved, but just the metaphor, always side by side, colonized, always side by side, the lunch counter, always side by side. You never had a problem with my presence as long as I was subjugated. Now you have a problem with my personhood, and that's how it's always been.
That's it. That's it. Talk about, when we talk about this phrase, integrating into a burning ship or a burning house, so obviously the implication is it's still burning, right? Because, you have folks that will say, bring the resume of racial success stories, right? Well, yes, you've got folks who have gone through hard things that, we know what happened in Tulsa and Arkansas and all that, but that's in the past. Look at all the things that have happened now. You get a lot of folks, even within Christian circles, that will often point out, and they want to run the resume of the good things, and there are things to be positive about. I look at that as a form of toxic positivity. You have things that we talk about that are toxic all the time, and we attach that almost ad nauseum. But in this case, there are folks who feel this pressure to have to, well, let's look at the bright side. Look at all the successes that we've had going forth. What do we say to that?
No, I have a question for you, bro. You're an attorney. How hard was it to become an attorney? And how you're a black man as an attorney, right? What is the representation of black men who are attorneys, and how does that parallel to someone who may grow up impoverished because of redlining? And what is the journey it takes for one to achieve where you sit now? And the reason I ask that is because I think it's very important. The model, it's not the person that, you always go to a figure who has made it out, or and you try to use that as an excuse. Like, look at fill in the blank, right? The exceptional Negro.
That's the word,
right?
That's exactly.
And it's and it's like
exactly.
you look at one person, but you forget the millions of others who are still caught in the suffering.
That's right.
And so
That's
I just want to hear from you.
No, I think I love that question, because I think we all would agree that, in my opinion at least, what seems to be more accepted within white spaces is the black exceptional story. I mean, let's just be real. And what I mean by that is, if you are black or brown or other, you're not allowed to even be average. Like, you almost feel the pressure to have to be exceptional in order to have a story worth mentioning, or at least for your personhood to even tangentially be considered. You got to be exceptional. Either incredibly talented, well-spoken, your intelligence has to be off the charts, right? So now you feel the pressure to have to be exceptional. You feel that pressure.
Said your subject and verb don't even have to.
Come on, that's the issue, right? Because frankly, and I've seen and it's still not enough.
When it is, I don't want to say when it is enough, but when it is more than enough, we then become a threat. And we become the next MLK.
Yeah, that's it. Because you're only allowed, and you're only allowed to have X amount at the table at one time. There can only be one. And I think it was who was it? There was a question posed to, I think it was to Richard Pryor. I think you know what I'm talking about. When Eddie Murphy was coming up. That's it. When Eddie Murphy was coming up, and they were like, hey, what is it like being the next Richard Pryor? And Eddie would talk about it, and even some of his writers would say, man, I hate when we do this. Like, why is it that in a space that's been dominated by white folks in stand-up comedy at the time, that when there's one that breaks through, that's the only space that's allowed? Yeah. So if there's ever anybody else, and the only way for you to be considered the next Richard Pryor, you better be exceptional. And he brought up the point, he said, there are no, white comedians don't do that. There's not like a situation where it's like, what is it like to be the next Jerry Seinfeld? Like, nobody did that in the 90s. It was just, we have another. And they would come in. You got a slate of comedians at a stand-up comedy show. You could have 8, 9, 10 guys that all look the same. You only got one black. And I think that, so to your point, I mean, I think that the issue is there's a pressure that you feel. And I would just add on top of that, as a pastor, right? Having planted a church out of a very prominent white wealthy church, being a black pastor that Either they look at you as safe enough, they look at you as intelligent enough, they look at you as likable enough. But what happens is, to your point, things that remind them that you are still a black man causes all kinds of issues. Because now, and this is maybe part of the question I wanted to pose is, when we talk about, hey, we've got folks who love Jesus. Tasha, you've talked about this. Folks that love Jesus, we all love Jesus together. There's folks watching this broadcast right now. They love Jesus. And yet when these issues come up, there seems to still be a divide. So the question oftentimes that I'm asking is, are we worshiping two different Jesuses? And are we bowing our head at two different crosses? How does that land?
I just got one line.
Please.
I think one Jesus is a mascot and the other one's a Messiah.
Yes.
Come on. All right.
I'm about to stick my toe in this
Get it in there.
all
Get
the
it,
way.
get it.
I think one of the realities this year where I think that surprised me, especially in people who are doing justice advocacy work, people who are leaning into the conversation, people who have some understanding. I think it goes back to like when we start talking about not just people's theological framework, but like back to what they believe about God. Like, and I think that was the reality of the thing that happened this year after a certain person was murdered. That I saw, we don't believe the same thing about God. Like clearly we cannot believe, and these are people that are sitting beside you, that are with you, and there's no way in the world that you can believe the same thing about God when you are putting someone on a pedestal that has said very hurtful and harmful things, and the only thing you're telling me is I have to contextualize. If I have to contextualize everything that you're saying, something's wrong with what you're saying. And so I think that divide that we see in Christian space, and that was a big divide where I'm like, even some of the people who are sitting at the table saying that they get it, they don't get it. And I was like, we're not starting from the same starting point. We're not starting from the same doctrine of God. Like we can't be.
Yeah.
I would say, first I want to say, I'll start with this. The God you see is the God you get. And so along with, you live on a level of your revelation. So the God that you see, or the Jesus that you see, if that's the Jesus that you get, and you live on the level of your revelation, you can only express and live out Jesus to the level that he's been revealed to you. So now in case, I'm thinking about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was in Germany,
Yeah.
and they presented a German Jesus, or whatever Jesus that was. But even at a point in his revelation of what he saw in the book, the biblical Jesus, there was an incongruency. It was incompatible with the one that they were serving to him. And he knew within his spirit something was missing.
Yeah.
And he didn't find the biblical Jesus that he was looking for until, everybody say until he came to Harlem.
Yes, sir.
During the Harlem Renaissance.
Yeah.
And he served under a black pastor
Yeah.
in a black church.
Yeah.
And he said himself, I don't know the exact quote, he paraphrasing that he didn't come to know Christ until his Harlem experience.
That's right.
So I know we're talking about, are we serving two different Jesuses? I don't want to say, well, there's only one.
Right.
So I think we have different revelations
Yeah.
of who he is
Yeah.
and what we're seeing.
Yeah.
So I'll just stop there.
Can I jump in right there? So back on the mascot or Messiah thing, another thing I heard is your theology is cultivated through experience. So when you have, quote, the white church and the black church, one had a God who was an accessory. The other one had a God who was a necessity. right? When all you had was the Lord, when all you had was faith, when all you had was songs and spirituals and prayer and this notion of something better than my current experience, God was a necessity. When you see God as just an accessory to polite society, it's rare to find deep faith, right? And you pull that across history, there's this Jesus that becomes a mascot to my lived experience, to my racial and ethnic identity, and even to my politics that is incongruent with Scripture. And then inevitably there's a conflict when it bumps into the real one. You know?
Yeah, this real tiny thing. You made me think about something else too. Back to Bonhoeffer.
Yeah.
Is that in his experience, he witnessed black people worshiping and seeing Jesus as the suffering servant.
Yeah.
And seeing a Jesus where they were able to recognize someone that could feel and has experienced their suffering.
Yeah. No, yeah. Oh, for sure. Like when I hear this question about two different Jesuses, it made me think about Tasha mentioning how she was saying all these hurtful things that they were saying these need to be in context. It made me think about the only way that you can get, like they're begging for us to have context to understand those hateful things, but I'm thinking the only way that they can get the Jesus that they're getting is to have to remove him out of the context. So in order, if you look at, like we're talking about Bonhoeffer, if you look at Jesus in the 66 books, if you look at him, whether you're talking about theophanies, whether you're talking in the Old Testament, whether you're talking about him showing up in the New Testament in flesh, the only way you can get the Jesus that you get that is a racist, that's a nationalist, that's a whatever it is that we put on it, it's to remove it from the context and say, this is mine. And to take him out. And then, because just like when we take anything out of context, whether you're talking about rumors, gossip, when you take anything out of context, you can do what you want with it.
Yeah.
Right.
And it becomes malleable. And so the concern for me though is that we're doing that. Not we're doing that, but it's being done. And I fear, since this is one thing they like to throw around judgment and consequence, I fear that there is huge judgment on the other side of prostituting Jesus in this way, where we have had such consumption with him to have our way with him, to get our way, but not actually live out the dictates of what holding on to him means. So
I wonder if when we talk about the idea of two Jesuses and like the debate that kind of ensues, I wonder if there's a theologian, I can't remember his name, but he had a phrase that stuck with me. He said something to the effect of, if God has created us in his image, we have most certainly returned the favor. And what he's really getting at is, I do think, honestly, I would push back. We know there's only one Jesus historically and biblically, but I think for rhetorically, there are multiple Jesuses, because what happens is, at least from what I've seen, is there are people who remake Jesus into their image. So like you said, I mean, whatever my predilections are, that's Jesus. Whatever my biases are, that's Jesus. Whatever things moves me, whatever things that kind of get me going, whatever incites my greatest affections, that's Jesus. So when they read the Bible, they're reading Jesus doing things, and they're assuming that he's feeling and thinking the same things that I am. And so they remake in a way that then we go, wait a minute, but I thought we were all reading the same Bible. We are. But we're eisegeting some things into the text. I mean, come on, talk about it, because that's... And when we know this, when we but we know it is, right? We know it happens, and we know it happens historically. You can go back. I've looked at sermon notes from the 1800s where there are pastors preaching. We know we broadcast live right now from Georgia. Okay, some folks know this already. Georgia was the last state in the Union of the 13 colonies to allow for slavery. There's a lot of reasons why. We can talk about why. It wasn't because of morality, y'all. That's not the reason why. But this state was the last one to do it. And the primary reason why Georgia finally took the plunge was because of a man known as the Prince of Preachers, George Whitefield, who wanted to build an orphanage and wanted free labor to do so, and so began to preach to the legislature in Savannah, Georgia, where the capital was at the time, and goes on and preaches these sermons to the acting governor and convincing them that the best way to spread the gospel is to bring these hedonistic, beastly creatures over, preach the gospel to them so that now they have the gospel. And it worked like a charm. Folks went, oh, because Jesus. Because Jesus wants, Jesus wants these folks to be saved, right? George Whitfield. Yeah, get it out there. We're going to get it out there. Yeah, we all do. And I mean, so much so Benjamin Franklin, who was not a Christian, would talk and brag about his oratorical skills and how he made him want to give money to the man. And all of that said, there's no question that there was when people hear that, they have to see, is that congruent with the Jesus that I believe in? Well, if I've remade him in my image, it is congruent with the Jesus that I believe in. It just is.
Which makes me now speak into understanding civil rights movement.
Come on.
And what lens.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with what Jesus are you viewing the civil rights movement? Because if we're talking about George Whitfield, then we're thinking about the Great Awakening.
Yeah, you have to. You
Which
have
they
to.
recognize as revival. But for us, these are my people.
Yeah.
We look at the civil rights movement and we see revival.
Come on.
Which brought transformation and brings change.
Yeah.
No, this isn't a revival conversation, but where there is true revival, there's transformation in communities.
That's right.
There's justice. That's right. There's equity. There's a fight for equality. There's a fight for change. And so when we say that we are rocking with Jesus, and we make that connection to the civil rights movement, we have not used the civil rights movement as a thing to say, well, this is our Jesus. No, but to say that because we are followers of the way.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's already
Because we
consistent.
are followers of the way. This is consistent and in alignment with who Jesus is that we see in the Bible.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Come on.
Yeah. Can I just tap in real quick?
Yeah,
Oh my gosh. So you mentioned that with revival, and that's been a phrase that's been thrown around in a lot of Christian nationalist circles. Revival, revival, revival. Now for me, I think I love the Bible. I love every jot and tittle, like the Bible, like King James said. I love it. But what I find out about revival, and I told this to a church, not my church, but to a church before that I was at. It was a multicultural, it was a white church. But I said revival is always, now sometimes it's always preceded by, and an integral part of revival is repentance. Whenever you look throughout the Old Testament, there was a mass call to repentance, sackcloth, ashes, then revival, and then I will. And so, but when I look at all these things, we think revival is great worship services, people coming back to church.
People buying Bibles.
Right. People buying Bible. But when I ask of you to repent, which is the impetus to revival, we don't repent. So whatever we're calling this right now is going to fade. It's going to fade because there's been no repentance.
Yeah.
And there's been no 180, no change. No, you're good. You're good.
Now the revival thing.
That word is triggering, by the way.
Yeah.
Let's tear it down. Let's tear it down. Because I had a class a couple weeks ago, and I lifted this discussion that revival is a popular word, but we're misusing it.
Yes.
Revival starts with death.
Yeah.
Revival starts with death. I think what we're calling revival is resuscitation. It's things that just barely passed out.
Yeah.
It's still you. You still reek of all the isms. You still are very much alive and well, still breathing. Your heart's beating. Your eyes just aren't open. Calling that revival. Revival was the tomb smelling and Lazarus being bound and Christ saying, come forward. You feel me? The other thing, too, we talked about this Whitfield character, right? We got to go back to this notion because you talked about awakening and theology. We go back to people like Howard Thurman, who identified in this pivotal text, Jesus and the disinherited, right? Who recognized and framed Jesus properly as this poor Palestinian Jew who was living life in the margins, who constantly saw and ministered to people in the margins, right? So he's touching lepers. He's giving controversial parables like the Good Samaritan for this whole group of people. Even the women, exactly. They're leading, they're pouring finances into his ministry. And then we got to go to James Cone as well, right? So what does it look like to see the biblical Jesus for who he is, and then to let that bleed into what we call a revival in the church, you know?
That ain't happening. I don't know about your revival. They ain't doing that.
So who you say Jesus is for tells me a lot about your theology.
Oh, for sure.
Woo.
Well,
Just say, I don't need my...
let me just
I
ask.
got you. That's good.
So I want to pose this question to you, Dr. Terence, because You put it out there already, and I sense that there probably is a deeper road we need to go down when we talk about this word revival, because I, like you, there are some triggering things about that. The same way that I have problems with the word reconciliation, I think there's an argument that can be made that even revival may not even be the right word sometimes. So talk about that. Tell me kind of how that hits you.
I mean, the way that I've seen revival these days has been in relationship to politics.
Yeah, that part.
Right? You know, it's sort of baked into this taking a society back, and then we got to ask, what are we going
Take
back
our country
to?
back, right?
Right.
Right.
I had wrote these notes.
Yeah.
Like the reason why we needed civil rights was because Black people were legally segregated in schools, housing, transportation, and in public spaces. Right. Hostile architecture is the designing and engineering of public space that excludes a group of people, right? We see that today even amongst those who are unhoused. But my grandmother, who is 93 years old and can still tell you when she was born in 1932, when she grew up, there were certain parts of this city where she was not able to go. There are newspapers that still exist in this city who used to post lynchings in those papers, right? And people would gather and buy what? Postcards, right? Voting was blocked, right? Poll taxes, literary tests, intimidation, police brutality, right? Fire hoses, all those sorts of things. When we question what happened during the civil rights policy, major policy shifts happened. Brown versus Board, right? Civil Rights Act of 1964, Voting Rights Act of 1965. The Civil Rights Act of 1968, right? Black people really didn't, as one of my professors used to say, start to become somewhat of a citizen until we saw Shirley Chisholm's name on the ballot. And that was in the 1970s, right? And so,
So long ago.
seeing how we have seen resistance, nonviolence form of resistance to the struggle has given us the access to experience some of the fullness of what God wanted us to experience. But now when we talk about revival, it's cloaked in let's shut down museums. It's cloaked in let's ban books, even yours, right?
Yeah.
Or even mine. It's cloaked in let's worship on the street corner and get a bunch of young people to co-opt words like woke or co-opt terms to suggest that we are taking something back that is broken. And my question is, how can you take something back that is broken when it's never been repaired in the first place?
That's right.
You know what I mean?
I
and
agree.
so
Yeah.
when I hear revival, it's almost like we are ushering people into a mentality that we need to go backwards instead of forwards. And sometimes I interpret that as people saying that we need to put a period where God is trying to put a comma. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I'm saying like I don't want to call names, but you see these folks out there like rallying and celebrating the fact that people's families are being snatched off the streets. That's not revival.
Right.
That's not Jesus.
That's
Right.
You know what I mean? Like people celebrating the fact that there were pauses on food subsidies and people's
That's not revival.
refrigerators were going empty. That's not revival.
That's right.
No.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Celebrating the fact that the educational system is being challenged and we are disbanding the Department of Education. That's not revival.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Talk about it. Yeah.
That's not revival.
Yeah.
So I think they are using that term revival as a scapegoat for underhanded politics.
Yeah.
It's a scapegoat and a smokescreen in a way where it's interesting because when you do like these magicians that do these illusory tricks, the key is to keep you distracted. That's all it is. So if I use a different phrase, if I have another way to kind of color this thing for you, you won't notice that I'm taking your money out your pocket. I think it bears mentioning the irony that Dr. King when he was assassinated, he was not popular in this country. I think people
very unpopular.
assume,
Very
right?
unpopular.
The most hated person.
Yeah.
I mean, by
Yeah.
far. There was a poll. I want to. Yeah, for real. There was a poll. I want to say maybe a year, if that, before about what people thought of King. He was 39, and I think,
Even
if I'm
from
not
black pastors.
mistaken,
Yeah.
his approval rating might have been below 30% at the time. The majority of white evangelicals, even though they didn't really use that word back then, but the majority of white Christians, they weren't rocking with King like that.
Where was he assassinated?
In Memphis,
What was he doing?
I was
before he
just
got-
about. That's where I was going. Talk
Standing
about
with
it.
poor sanitation.
Please
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
it. Please.
Yeah.
For
Because-
fair wages.
And that, y'all,
Yeah.
this is to me the crux of a matter that we don't talk about often, because people think King was assassinated for his dream. People love ethereal dreams. People love aspirational stuff, and I think white folks back then could get behind that because there was no skin in the game yet. But once he moved the conversation to include economics into the civil rights conversation, that's when the threat became real. Talk about it, please. Please.
Yeah.
Come
So
to get our check.
So here's the thing. To your point, it wasn't because of his dream. It's because of what would have been known as the Poor People's Campaign.
That's right.
right.
That's what I wanted to
And
talk about.
I think
Shout out to Reverend Barbara who's leading that.
let's go. Absolutely, absolutely. So let's talk about what was really behind slavery. Racism was a mechanism for capitalism.
That's right.
And if you really study King and not just the quotes, you talk about the triple evils, like militarism, capitalism, and racism, right? Racism and dividing people up on this hierarchy was a means to just divide and conquer. And to have this movement that would have united people around how this small circle of elites are controlling everyone or trying to subjugate everyone or trying to oppress everyone, there was too much motion with that. It was too much of a threat. And so now all of a sudden we need to take him out.
Which was the same reason why Fred Hampton was taken out.
Yeah,
When you look at the fact that he was getting both poor blacks on the south side of Chicago, Irish folks, Lithuanians, folks who were coming together. So when we talk about, and it's important to bear this out, to kind of flesh this out, when you talk about believers of all colors and stripes or what have you, listen, you've got folks, and it's true, like there are folks who are suffering. They're able to identify with the gospel in ways that those who are not can't always. Doesn't mean that they're completely removed. You have to, if anything, get to a place where you're able to contextualize. We're always asked for those from the bottom, if you will, to do the contextualizing. But honestly, those at the top need to be doing the contextualizing. But it's interesting because when you talk to poor white folks in Appalachia, those were people that King was talking about in the Poor People's Campaign. When you talk about the poor white immigrant that was in Chicago that had not yet been invited into being white yet, those were the people that they were actually talking about too. When they all come together and say, oh my goodness, we do have a common oppressor. And in many ways, we're not just pointing to one group. We have a common mentality that is oppressive. And how do we start to attack that? That becomes what you need to be killed now. We got to take that person out. Because, and I think honestly, what you brought up, and we obviously don't have all the time in the world to talk about this, but I do think it bears mentioning how we baptize certain economic approaches in the red, white, and blue.
Man, you're gonna start something right
And so to talk about
that green
whatever ism, right? If we're talking about capitalism, what does unfettered, unrestrained capitalism without a social compact or a social contract look like? How does that bear out? That's for another time and another day.
Can I
No, go ahead.
say-
Yeah, please.
I just want to say, if you ever get a chance to go watch the documentary King in the Wilderness,
Oh my goodness.
there's a part in it where Harry Belafonte is talking about his relationship with King, and he says he had so much stress and anxiety, and people, he could not even go and seek out therapy for the simple fact that people would use that against him. So it was, there was a sense of isolation in carrying the weight in that moment. I don't think people fully understand what that means. And we fast forward now, we're all respective leaders in our own context. Isolation is it's damaging.
Yeah.
And it's rooted in capitalism.
Come on. Yeah.
It is rooted in capitalism. You think about it, right? What if capitalism is destructive. It's so destructive, it will dictate if you're able to drive across town to even be in a space like we're meeting in right now. Capitalism is so destructive, it will keep you out of certain public spaces, out of certain communities, out of certain educational institutions, out of certain churches, out of certain relationships.
Come on. Talk
Come
about
on,
it.
man. And it's like
Yeah.
Out of healthcare.
out of healthcare,
out of education.
you know, healthcare premiums are going up right
Tripling.
now. And
Yeah.
King's anti-poverty movement before he passed away is what we need to continue to carry right now. Because capitalism is, I mean, it's causing this country to decay. It's causing people's theology to decay. Like, I question a person's theology if you have more, if you're influenced more by capitalism than how Jesus actually lived. Like, I love the text in Matthew 9 when it says, when he saw them like sheep without a shepherd, he was moved with compassion.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Moved with compassion.
Yeah.
But yet now we call it revival when we demean the word empathy. We
Toxic
call it
empathy.
revival
Right.
when we demean the word compassion. Are you crazy?
Yeah.
Like, are you crazy?
Yes.
Who goes to Memphis to stand with sanitation workers without empathy?
That's right.
Without compassion,
That's right.
without being closely connected to the struggle, man. And it's like, what are we even talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
The incarnate Christ came to dwell among people, and that's what we should be doing right now. And, you know, I'm saying all this to say, man, like, your theology has to live. And if you ever want to know where a person stands with Jesus, I'm looking at how you treating people, man, because you have to live your sermon.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You just dropped the whole sermon.
Epistles written on the hearts of men. That's what Paul said. Yeah. That's it.
That's it. Well, there's probably a million other things we could probably and should probably be talking about. Sadly, we don't have a million minutes to do it. This has been a very necessary conversation. I pray that this is an on-ramp for those that are watching that maybe have not thought through these things. If you have not been in environments where you've been able to think, this is an environment that we invite you to do so. If you are wanting ways to get more connected, if you want ways to maybe help start these conversations in your communities, reach out to us at Be The Bridge. Reach out to folks in your community that are a part of Be The Bridge. Yeah. This is a part of what doing the work looks like. It's not just sitting around singing Kumbaya, singing our favorite worship songs. This is what, as Dr. Terence just pointed out, how we live our theology out. We need to be fleshing these things out. So we invite you to join, find ways to connect. We have all of our information out there for you. I don't even have it all in my head right now, but we would encourage you to do so. Thank you for tuning in. God bless you, and we look forward to being with you again.
Peace.